So here we go. This is us. I have this voice echoing in my head from the last webinar going, I don't know, does it look like us?
Yeah, looks like us.
Like, did I say that? Yeah, so y'all probably know us pretty well already, but I've been doing this herbal constituents stuff for coming up on 30 years, I would say. I got fascinated with it when I was a chemistry nerd and herbalist at the same time. So I wrote a textbook, Herbal Constituents, on it. I graduated from UNCA, and I also founded and still teach at Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism, which is an awesome context for studying herbal constituents. Clinical vitalist herbalism. Talk about big picture. Yeah, so that's me, and this is Kat.
Hello. Yes, my name is Kat Martello, and I originally got some experience working in the herbal supplements business in some natural food stores, and I just developed a passion for plants and their medicinal values. I also am a Bastyr herbal science graduate, and after that experience, I worked in a couple of apothecaries doing FDA compliance, as well as formulating and compounding medicine for naturopaths. I also have experience in analytical laboratories running the HPLC device and making some certificates of analysis. So that's my background.
Total nerd, total nerd.
Thanks.
Yeah. And this is my friend, the unicorn. Some of you may have met the unicorn. Okay, so that's us. So why study constituents, right? So this is super interesting because when I first started learning about herbalism, hardly anybody was saying anything about constituents, but once in a while a name would be dropped, right? Raspberry contains fragrine. Fragrine doesn't actually exist. That's pretty funny.
Like,
as far as I don't know. I mean, there was a typo somewhere, a language thing or something. But you'd hear things like that early on, but now people are talking more and more and more about it. Number one, we know a lot more about it now than we did 30 years ago. And number two, it's people are starting to see the relevance of it. Like if you're an herbalist or a holistic practitioner of any sort, healthcare professional, medicine maker, cannabis industry, like people are really starting to be interested in what a knowledge of constituents can do for you. And more people are becoming versed in it. And more teachers are popping up, like that awesome gal right there, Heather Irvine. And it's just becoming relevant. And the cool thing about it too is it's bringing more conventional medicine and medical research and herbal medicine together. Right, because it's becoming a common language set to tie all these different approaches to medicine together, because people can understand what each other are talking about more. So that's pretty exciting. And I love my medically trained friends, all different kinds, to be able to have these kind of conversations about, oh, so there's this constituent and it affects this aspect of physiology, and there's a receptor binding thing, or maybe there's like, what does the liver do to it to run it through the detoxification systems and all this stuff. So when you start understanding things about constituents in herbs, it really opens up your ability to see what's going on in there, and also your ability to communicate with other people about it, right? Because it used to be, as herbalists, we were like, how do herbs work? And to quote the great Doug Elliott, really well. So it's the context is really important, but I think more and more people are getting down into the really fascinating details of herbal constituents now, right? But so here we go. Herb does not equal constituent, right? Herbs have thousands, thousands of ever-changing phytochemicals in them, right? And so when you talk about one constituent, you're not talking about the herb. You're talking about, like, if the herb was like the complete works of Shakespeare, one constituent would be the letter M, or maybe with all its friends, it would be the word like magnificent or something, right? So there's a lot going on in a plant. So a constituent does not equal a plant. A plant does not equal a constituent, right? And that's really almost one of the top ideas to keep in mind when you're understanding how this all works. Okay, because it's super common for people to confuse plant with constituent. and they'll say something like this. So say you're taking turmeric, and curcumin is a constituent out of thousands in turmeric, right? And you go, so how is turmeric processed in the CYP450, set of enzymes in the liver? That's not a legit question. Turmeric is not, we're talking molecular, right? So we have to keep that big picture of the herb and its actions and energetics and like multiple constituents and the individual things that we know about constituents. Right. Yeah, that's important. So when you learn about constituents, you have another set of tools to understand how herbs work on a deep and functional level. And by functional, I mean physiological in the human body. Right. It's like, what is going on in there once we somehow ingest this herb or extract this plant, take the extract, what do we know about what's actually going on in here on the functional level, right? And it's like, I've always been a chemistry nerd. I love chemistry. I love a lot of it because you can't actually see a lot of it. You almost have to like see it with your inner vision, and then it starts getting kind of mystical to me, even though it's like math is precise and the stoichiometry and all that stuff, but it has this like almost like this mystical aspect to it, right? So it gives me, getting into the phytochemistry gives me a much deeper relationship with the herbs, which is really interesting because you'd think it would pull you out and abstract. But when you take it as what the plants are actually doing, right, it gives you this really deep and like functional understanding of how your medicines are working, how the plants are working, what are they up to, how is the body responding to them, what's happening inside here when you put them in here. You know what I mean? And so that's what I love about it, is it really kind of takes you down inside and you start seeing things that you didn't see before. Yeah. So deep and functional level, understanding constituents is understanding what herbs actually make and do inside themselves, right? So, sometimes we're like, oh, phytochemicals, the plant invented that. Amazing, right? Yeah, through all its ancestors and evolution, it's coded in its genes. It's like the plant invented that molecule. Right? It made it on purpose for a reason. Right. And then all its companion molecules and its synergists and its counterbalancing molecules, like this is what plants are doing. So, we might think of it as a human abstraction when we think about constituents, but it's more like our abstraction is us trying to understand this amazingly complex system of interconnected molecules that the plant has created. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm always like, plants are the master pharmacists, right? So because it's funny. It's like a lot of it is like, at some point you're like, phytochemicals, so what? You know what I mean? It's like, that's cool. I'll put it in my show, but like, I don't have a living relationship with it, right? But when you get into like the understanding that there's some kind of like energetic entities that plants have created, like that's what constituents are. The plants have created this energetic pattern that can do something. And then you're like, ooh, magic. Plant spirits. Oh, okay. Organized intelligence of nature. Thank you very much. Right. So so I want to say this one next, actually. Constituents are signals that carry the powers of the herbs or the messages of the herbs. Right. I look at, and we have a cool picture coming up. Maybe I'll save most of the rest of that for the cool picture, actually. But start thinking them as, instead of as things, start thinking them as active signals. Right? A constituent isn't a thing. It's a pattern of energy, which is a signal. Signals transmit information. Signals get processes to, happen or change or stop or whatever, right? Signal. This is like we're communicating through signal right now. It's the internet, right? Look at that. So signals are for communication, right? So being a molecule and being a signal allows you to communicate with whoever ingests you, right? So I see constituents a lot of times as plants sending signals to people. Very cool. Yeah. And then we respond to the signal by doing something. Hopefully, something gets better is our response. Yeah. Or something gets nourished or restored, whatever. So constituents contribute to the actions and energetics of herbs, right? When we talk about herbal actions, this is how herbalists learn herbs. Of this action, it's a relaxant, tonic, it's a tonic astringent, it's a demulcent, it's
Carminative.
It's carminative. Yeah, it's like all these herbal actions, right? How can we use a knowledge of constituents to help us understand those actions? Right. And then you start looking at a whole bunch of different plants who have similar actions, right? And you can go, oh, do they have similar constituents in some way? And then you start seeing how the constituents correlate with the actions, right? Yeah. So, actions and energetics, it's like you can take the lens of using herbal constituents and you can look at every aspect of herbalism through that lens. Right. And you can kind of see like what's going on behind the curtain. That's what makes it fun. Okay, so here's another thing. Why study constituents, right? Understanding solubility and extraction is super important for making good medicine, right? So we have this series called Make Better Medicine. Some of you may have taken the solubility and extraction course, right? Where we go into that. But basically, you can make really, decent herbal medicine by not knowing very much about solubility, polarity, solvents, extraction, whatever. You can make decent herbal medicine, right? But you can make it better and better and better and better the more you know about this stuff, right? Because then you'll be like, oh, there's a reason I should have used 50% ethanol instead of 25 with this particular plant, with this particular method, right? So you can really start, developing your craft of medicine making with knowledge of constituents, right? And I love that. We've been teaching this for a while and I keep hearing back from people and they're like, oh, I made the best elixir. It was so cool, and we're like, yes, that's what we're doing. So there's that, right? So you want to learn about which constituents are coming out of which herbs, right? And even like, when you extract an herb, you can extract it to focus on pulling different sets of constituents out. Right. So herbs aren't just one medicine. They got a lot of stuff going on, right? They're like, you can find like, probably like, I don't know, I'm just making this up now. But like, if somebody were like, how many actions do you think the average medicinal herb has? I would be like, I don't know, 15, around in there. So there's all these different personality traits that an herb has that you can attract out of it into your medicine if you understand those constituents and their solubility and how to extract them. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So we'll get into that. It's really, if you read scientific papers, if you get into medical research, phytochemical literature, anything, a lot of people want to know, how does the plant work? So there's a phrase called mechanisms of action, right? Which is like, how does that thing actually work? And I always have to giggle at that one because like mechanisms is so mechanical. Whereas plants and humans are definitely not mechanical. True. Right? We're way more complex, adaptive, interactive, multiplicitous. So the mechanisms is kind of an interesting way to look at it. Like, what's the mechanism of action of metals? Well, you flip this switch and then you produce solder over here and then you like tighten these screws and you've got it fixed, But the point of that is that, we do know phytochemically and biochemically quite a bit about how certain constituents influence the body. And we're learning more and more scientifically about how herbs influence the body also, right? We're really expanding a lot of research now with that, which is cool. So if you are the person who's like, okay, which molecule is coming out of that plant? Which receptor is it talking to? Which set of signaling, the post receptor signaling is going on? And how does that turn on this one gene or suppress this other gene, resulting in less of this product that, if you're really interested in deeply tying it into physiology that way, understanding constituents is key. It's key. It's like the magic key that gets you into that world where you can be like, oh, so that's what's going on partially, you know? And then if you want to understand, oh my God, toxicology, side effects, right? Herb drug interactions, this is all molecular stuff, right? Contraindications, allergies, like people having allergic reactions to things, sensitizing, all of that stuff about, ooh, you know, something is happening in the body. Maybe we need to look out for that. And maybe we need to make our medicines or use our herbs in a certain way to avoid these problems. And maybe, you know, this person with this situation taking these medications shouldn't use that herb. And this is why, because it's a molecular phenomenon. Right. So it's like, oh, herb drug interactions, you know, kind of sounds like, don't take those together. Something mysteriously unfortunate could happen. But if you really look in there and see what that is, oh, it washes this drug out of your body too fast and you need it, or it makes this drug accumulate too much in your body, or, you know, it deals with the pharmacokinetics, if you know what that means, or how, you know, just how medications are processed by your body. And then you know how and when to avoid it or use it, right? And that's really, really important if you're a clinician of any sort, right? So understanding phytochemistry really helps you understand potential toxicology or herb drug interactions. Right, which is like super cool. Yes, that's one of the things I teach at CSCH is that whole, it's called biotransformation. I love that, which includes ADME. So let's see what else we got. Oh, we've got the thing, and then we're going to do our special demo. Thing first. Let's do the thing first. Okay. So look at that. Yes, what do you see in there? Some of you may have seen this before. You just stare at that dark right in the middle. As soon as I do that, wow, that is so cool looking. I almost see it pulsating. I see symmetry, right? I see that symmetrical pattern, right in the middle. Hello, I see the void, the void from which all beingness arises, right? And then I see, oh, look, petals of a flower. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, must be in the lily family. Flower of life pattern, right? And then I see, if you take this and you animate it, right, in your mind, just turn it on. Like this is a snapshot from the movie, right? If you animate this and you see all of these things like coming out, almost like sun, what do they call those things that jump out of the sun? Yeah, like solar flares on a really tiny level, and going back and disappearing down in and reappearing. And there's like these nodes, these energetic nodes, and you're like, whoa, that is a pattern. That sixing pattern goes all the way around, doesn't it? Right? So this is an amazing, beautiful thing that's based on something that you've probably been introduced to, like that. Like that, right? Because if you take a chemistry course and maybe in high school, in college, postgrad, this is how humans communicate about molecules. This is I call this the hieroglyphics, right? So this is how we draw a molecule, put it in a book. It's in my Herbal Constituents book, right? You're like, oh, here's a drawing of catechin or something. This is how we do it. This is like the shorthand visual language. Right. This is like a petroglyph. Right. It's like a hieroglyph, right? And so this is how we learn it, and that's kind of boring compared to this, right? Yeah, honestly. It's useful. It's definitely it's got its uses. We're not sitting there in chemistry class taking notes like this. Well, maybe you are because you're an artist, but like not me. I'm taking notes like that, right? So this is handy. It exists for a reason, but it's a very spare language, right? This is more like reality. This is more like what a plant is making. And the reason I say that is because molecules are patterns. Here's my definition. Some of you have heard this before too. There's a pattern. You see it? Symmetrical. Flower of life. There's like a circular kind of pattern, and there's also a symmetrical pattern, right, to this. And so this is patterns. And what's it made of? It's made of energy. right? Mostly. So y'all know, if you remember anything about atoms, like, they've got some mass to them, but mostly they're energy and empty space, right? Because electrons are energy, and and there's a little bit of mass. An electron has a tiny bit of mass, but there's some mass there. But mostly it's a vibrating energy entity, literally, in the scientific definition of energy, right? And I always like to remind people, E equals mc squared, which means M is mass, C is the speed of light squared, and that makes energy, right? So if your mass or your matter is going super, super fast, it's energy. It's all the same thing, only different. You know what I mean? So I think of, this is what I was saying, I think of a molecule as an energetic entity. And I feel as though they are alive, because a plant is alive. Right. And we have very strict definitions of life in biology, which are also useful but limited. So when I see this signal, I see this pattern, I see pattern of energy, and it's living to me. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not reproducing itself, or whatever, but that could be dangerous. That's under the control of plant intelligence. Okay, so pattern of energy in relationship, right? And it's like, oh, what's the relationship about? So I think relationship is two things. One, these things represent atoms having a relationship with each other. Okay, like this. Atom, carbon, you don't draw the carbon, it's just there. Hydrogen, they're having a relationship with each other. Why do I call it a relationship? Because they're sharing a pair of electrons. Electrons are energy. It's an organized share. They are in some sort of communicatory relationship with each other. That's called a chemical bond. In this case, a covalent bond, right? It can be formed, it can be broken, it's dynamic, it's managed by enzymes, it's created as part of an atomic structure for a purpose. Right? So that's the relationship I see there. The atoms are sharing their energetic electrons with each other, right? And that creates the pattern, and that creates molecular structure. Okay, so there we have our molecular structure. So why do I think that it's a pattern of energy in relationship? Is because that's the definition of a signal. Okay. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like any sort of signal is an energy pattern. Like you think of different sound waves, for instance, and you look at a print of them and you're like, oh, pattern of energy, and like the energy of vibrating air, and like the eardrum picking up, translating, it's a signal. And molecules are signals because they're patterns of energy. And not only are they patterns of energy and signals, but they're signals that our bodies can interpret. Awesome. Right? Yeah. And that's what the great physiomedicalist William Cook was talking about back in 1869 when he wrote in his, I gave this out as a bonus for signing up for this class too. That's cool. He wrote his physiomedicalist dispensatory, right? And he's like, does an herb have an action? Does a body have a reaction, or both? And he talked a lot about response to the herb, right? And he's like, when you think of an herbal action, what you're saying is, this is how my body responds to this herb. I see. Right? And if you and he didn't understand constituents very well, because it was 1869, although he was super smart, right? So he didn't have so many correlations between constituents and response in the body as we do now. We have a lot of detailed information about that, right? But he observed, give a person this plant, their body responds this way, extract this plant in a certain way, changes the body's response. Like, he had a broad understanding, but not a detailed understanding of what was behind that signal response phenomenon, right? Neat, yeah. And now we can look at constituents and identify a lot of that, signal response phenomenon through understanding the constituents of the nerve, which is super cool. Yeah. So that's the kind of things we talk about when we talk about these, right? So this is the shorthand signal for that. And it's useful. And we actually, in this class, we deconstruct this thing. We're like, what exactly does that mean? And why are they showing it that way, you know? Because it's a code too. You know, this looking at molecules like this, it's code, right? And I love codes. Cryptonomicon. Okay, so we wanted to jump out of this and show you something real quick too, because we got a little demo for you here. Right? Yeah. Check this out.
All right.
Okay.
Got some red cabbage juice.
Yeah. Some of you have seen this before, right? So we have mystery fluid number 1. Okay, let's hold it up so they can really see it here, right? So this is a menstruum or a solvent, right? Those are two different words for the same thing. Mystery fluid number 1 here. And we have a squeezy dropper and a thing. So I'm going to put some mystery fluid number 1. Yeah, what's in there? Hey, looks like plant matter. Some mystery fluid number 1 in here. I don't know, all of it, some of it, whatever. You didn't see that? Nobody saw that? And then we're going to take some. That
Let me have this
happen.
full red cabbage juice.
Okay, we're only going to use a little bit. It's fine. So check this out. So first of all, red cabbage juice, a lot of you probably know, is that it contains a pigment. Pigment means something that has color, right? So it contains this beautiful, oh, look at that. Isn't that awesome? Did you juice this?
I did juice it.
Yeah.
I blended it.
Such a pretty
Let's
color.
see.
I wonder how close.
Oh, here.
I wonder, yay, big headlamp glow. Oh yeah, look at that. That
Yeah,
is
it's kinda
so
hard to
pretty. I know, right?
Here. There we go. That's purple.
Yeah. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Okay, so this is purple because it has anthocyanins. Yay, we know a lot about anthocyanins, right? Sorry, I just peered off the edge there for a minute. So anthocyanins could be purple, as they are in this beautiful purple cabbage. And I know it's officially called red cabbage, but that sure isn't red to me.
That's purple.
That's like violet. So if we put some of this in mystery fluid number 1, what happens? How close can we get this? Focus, focus, camera, focus. What? Dude, did you see that? I love when that happens. This is the old experiment from my 8-year-old childhood chemistry set called "Turn water into wine." It's like my new version of that, right? That was one of the experiments. But look at that. So what? There's not the like what happened in there, right? This is a molecular phenomenon. Let's squirt it in the other one. Watch this. Okay, I don't want to mix up so I don't get the. You know what? I might just go right into this one. Got it? We just have a lot of beakers up there because beakers are cool. Okay. You never have too many beakers, right? Okay, so what's going to happen? Mystery fluid number 2. Dude, nice, good demo. Look at that. That's a pretty color. I could paint my house that color.
Ooh, yeah, nice blue.
Yeah. Wow. Totally different than the first one, right? So what's going on? That is the same stuff. Look at that, right? So, hey, if I just told you, you know, anthocyanins are pH sensitive and they turn different colors when they're in different pH, right? It's a lot cooler to see it than just to hear about it. So this is white vinegar. It's acidic. So your anthocyanins are turning this pretty pink color. It looks more pink in real life than I'm seeing on my computer. It's just really glowing like ruby pink. It's so pretty, right? And in a base, this is some baking soda. What did you say, 1% baking soda in water?
Yes.
You get this really cool blue color, right? And this was the original stuff. So it shows you that there's something going on with these really cool anthocyanin molecules. What practical thing can you extract from that? You might ask. A practical thing that you can extract from that is, you know, that anthocyanins can be a range of colors in any kind of pink or purpley red or blue, and then you start seeing them in different plants and flowers, right? And you're like, oh, I bet there's anthocyanins there. Oh, look at those blueberries. Oh, look at those aronia berries. Look at that eggplant. You know, look at these beautiful blue flowers over here. Like, you start, look at this red cabbage, you know, which is purple. So you can start actually seeing some of these molecules, which is really cool, right? Because then you have a sensory relationship with them, you know? So I just wanted to use that because that's one of those, this is one of the all-time favorite phytochemistry experiments that you have kids do at science fairs. They just don't know it's a phytochemistry demonstration, you know. It's called the red cabbage experiment or the red cabbage demonstration. And of course, I did it with my kid at the science fair, of course, both of them. Yeah, it's like, okay, pull out the red cabbage again. So let me share a screen again. Right. So the point of all the red cabbage was, not only is it cool to change, you know, change color of your anthocyanins, but it's also really cool to be able to have a sensory relationship with your phytochemicals. And having a sensory relationship with your phytochemicals, again, brings you into like living contact with them. Right. So the sensory aspect of understanding phytochemicals is called organoleptics, right? And that's when you can use your vision, like we just did, or you can use or you can use your smell, your olfactory sense, your aroma, which is really, really good for identifying certain phytochemicals, right? Yeah. You can use your taste, like how they taste. Are they bitter? Are they slippery? Are they pungent, like cayenne, right? I mean, you know, you can even like listen to, you can hear the effects of the textures of certain ones. You can interact with them.
Like, is it too dry or does it still have some moisture?
Yeah, you can hear if things are like squishy or scratchy or powdery, or, you know, you can use it for plant ID. Actually, you can do this to leaves, and different leaves make different sounds depending on their hairs and stuff, you know? So developing this real sensory relationship with the phytochemicals, I think, is a great way for herbalists to really get an understanding of them also. And, you know, even though we look at things like models of molecules and we can get very scientific with it, having that actual experiential relationship with the phytochemicals, I think, is super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, what time is it? Gosh,
it is 6:40.
No way. Maybe we'll go just a little over. Okay, so this is, I'm going to give you a survey of the kind of things that we look at. This is just like that flash that goes by, you know, only a little slower. This is the kind of things that we look at. We look at elements, like what elements are in there, like sulfur, for instance. When you bond sulfur to oxygen, what do you have? Fire, right? I hear fire as a word now. So this is the precursor actually of the fire molecule, which is allicin, right? So this is when you subject this to a certain enzymatic action, it releases two molecules of the fire, allicin. Yeah, this is allein. This is the precursor of allicin. It's a stable precursor of the fire. It's like you built a bonfire, you just haven't touched the match to it yet, but you constructed it really well. You touched the match to it, which is analogous to the enzyme, and whoosh, you have allicin, right? And so you learn about the relationship of elements to that character. Sulfur is a fire element, right? If you go back and look at alchemy, like sulfur is a fire element. Why do they call it brimstone? Because it comes out of volcanoes and hot springs and like deposits on the brim, right? That's brimstone is the old word for sulfur. So it's a fire element. It's born of fire. What happens when you bond fire to oxygen? Right? So there's some very elemental tie-ins to this too, which is really, really fascinating to me, right? But we look at like what elements are in a constituent. A constituent is a phytochemical, right? Like what elements are in there? What does that tell us? You know, what information does that give us? What signal does that send? How does it influence the energetics? Oh, listen, it's got sulfur and oxygen bonded together. It's super hot. Chew some raw garlic and you'll know what I mean. Like, wait, what's happening here? Molecular heat? It's still fire. Okay, we look at bonding. We look at that relationship thing. right? So bonding in a phytochemical is atoms having some kind of pattern of relationship with each other, right? Which is somewhat stable or it can change, right? So this can bring you into understanding things like stability, like what happens to this molecule if I heat it to this degree? Is it going to change? How long is this molecule going to stay fresh and active, right? How did I kind of, there we go. Yeah. I feel like I'm still disappearing somewhere. Like, hi. So how, does it age well? Like how long is it good for? Or is my process going to affect it? Does it need to be protected by an antioxidant, et cetera? Right. So that kinetic, like changeable aspect of the molecules is important to understand too, right? What might it react with? This is cool. I love this. This is one of the fundamental patterns of life on Earth, by the way, what biology uses. It's the tetrahedral carbon atom arrangement. So people are into tetrahedrons. Here it is. It's everywhere. Yeah, very important thing. Okay, polarity and solubility, right? This is for the medicine makers. So, obviously you don't have time to explain this, but there's an electromagnetic phenomenon, an electromagnetic property of every molecule, right? And it's a spectrum of different intensities of it, from not there to all there, right? And that's called polarity. Right. And to me, the yin yang symbol really brings that out. So why do we care about this special electromagnetic characteristic that every molecule has? Like, why is that a thing? Right. Because it's the main factor that determines solubility. Right. I mean, there's a lot of influences on solubility, but this is the big one. Why doesn't oil and water want to mix and stay together? Because their polarity is incompatible, right? Big example. So this kind of thing helps you tell us which solvents or menstrua we can use to get certain constituents, because like dissolves like, right? We're polarity matching our solvent to our constituent. Yeah, that's how you can really like, oh, so I want to get some of this out of this plant, right? You match your solvent to your constituent mainly based on polarity. And the cool thing about it is it's a spectrum, it's a continuum, right? So it's not just yes, polar or no, non-polar. There's a whole range in there that you get to play in. That's your like garden of delights. You're like, how do I harmonize all these polarities? What do I understand about these polarities? How can I use them to make better medicine, right? Example, water, very highly polar, right? It's got these attractions for each other. We're not going to go into these details because I always make way too many slides for a time slot. But the thing about water is when you say something, look down here, when you say something is water soluble, that means water, based on its polarity and other things, can pull that constituent out of that plant and put it into your mason jar. That's what water soluble means, right? But it's not just, yes, water soluble. No, it's not water soluble. It's a range, a continuum of solubility in water, right? So it just keeps going and going, right? So this is solvent matching. You're matching your solvent or your menstruum to the constituents you wish to pull out of a plant, mainly based on polarity. Right. So we learn about polarity a lot. And then there's synergy and standardization, right? So we talk about, we can focus in on, we can tunnel vision, we can hyper focus on a particular constituent like hyperforin or hyperforin, right? Look at that thing dance. Let it go. I love that. And you can learn a lot about that molecule. But then, like I said, it's like a letter. You have to put it back into context to see what it's doing in the context of the many other molecules, right? So this is what we call synergy, right? It's learning about how molecules work together, which is really cool, right? So it's yeah, that's something you really need to look at. And then standardization is when people are trying to like, oh, certain levels of these compounds should appear in this herb, So standardization and synergy to me are sort of counterbalancing entities, because you have to look at synergy and then you have to look at when something is standardized, what is it standardized to do? What is it looking to maximize the extraction of? And in doing so, what is it leaving behind? And are there important synergists out there, right? So these are really interesting questions when you're making standardized extracts. So phytochemistry helps you understand standardization, standardized extracts, whether or not they're appropriate for a certain, how to use them in the best way, Yeah. Variability is another huge thing. So phytochemicals don't just sit there, right? They don't just stay there and like float around in a little bag of cellular water or something, right? They're active and the plant is making them and unmaking them and using them up and making other ones depending on what's happening and how many grasshoppers are there and is there still snow on the ground? You know, the plant is like constantly adjusting its phytochemical content, its phytochemical profile, they call it, right? Here's a great example. So dandelion roots, inulin, feed your microbiome, great stuff. The levels of inulin in dandelion roots can vary, look at that, hugely. So it's, you know, average about 2% in the spring to about 40% in the fall. I'm assuming that's dry weight. That's a huge difference, right? That's a huge difference. And so if you're after like a lot of inulin from your dandelion roots, dig them in the fall, right? So it helps you understand things about harvesting cycles, why we harvest plants in a certain way, when we harvest them, how, you know, what is their growth stage? Like there's all these factors that affect which phytochemicals are in a plant and how much, right? And this is real herbalist skill right here because, you know the plants and how they look and smell different at different seasons and maybe how if you harvest them, wow, this one actually worked a lot better for these people than this one did. And then you start looking at what the plant is doing with the variability of its constituents, right? Because it's a living being and it's doing all this on purpose in an intelligent way. Okay, so there's that. We are recording this, by the way, as you know, so you can look at, if you want to look at this again later, we'll send you a link to it if you're like, but wait, we didn't even talk about the things because time marches on. So that's just a little bit more about that. Here's another thing that we do. We deconstruct the code language. This is what I love. I love etymology, word origins. I love how words fit together. I even love grammar. I know. So chemistry is a code. Chemistry language is a code. Everything means something, right? And there are layers to the code. I mean, it gets pretty gnarly when you get into the IUPAC names and everything, but it's all code. It all means something, right? So here's an easy example of that. So when we talk about polyphenols, like a lot of people have heard of polyphenols now, and I think that's really cool. Flavonoids, maybe you've heard of flavonoids if you haven't heard of polyphenols. Flavonoids are a subtype of polyphenol, right? So okay, polyphenol, cool, chemistry word, what does it mean? Right? And the meaning of chemistry words is in the code, right? So polyphenol, poly is short for polyhydroxy. Polyhydroxy. Okay, so polyphenol, polyhydroxy, phenol. Next, what do those mean? Poly means multiple or many, right? So multiple or many what's? OH groups. Oh, look at this. Bing, 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 bing. Multiple OH groups. Poly. And what does phenol mean? Phenol means a 6-carbon aromatic ring with an OH group. One or more bonded to it. Right? A phenol itself just has one OH group, but so you look at this and you're like, oh, wait a minute, is that what they're talking about? That is a 6-carbon aromatic ring. Aromatic, it's talking about the particular bonding in there, special. We'll get to that in the future. So yeah, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbons with, oh, look at that, an OH group on it. So that's phenol. So polyphenol is one or more, right? 6-carbon rings with one or more OH groups stuck onto them as prominent features of the molecule. Ding, it means something, right? That's the code. And I know I did that quickly, but that's what we do. It's like deconstruct the code of the language and deconstruct the code of the drawings, right? Like, what does this tell you? Why is there like a plus hovering over the oxygen? That's really cool looking. What does that tell you? What is that code for? Oh, it means oxygen has a positive charge on it. For reasons which we also explain. What does that tell you? It makes it super water soluble. You mean anthocyanins are a polyphenol? Because yes, they are. There are other water-soluble things too, right? But you can start learning about the polarity of a molecule and the solubility of a molecule by interpreting the drawings, which is really cool because then you're like, ooh, I'm getting the code, right? And then you can learn real world, consequences of that, right? So deconstructing the code, that's another thing we do. Oh, anthraquinones. Here's my example of an oddball polyphenol because I love yellow dock and a lot of herbalists love yellow dock. I mean, it's a great herb, right? And so it's got a bunch of constituents in it called anthraquinone glycosides, which I think is beautiful, like anthraquinone glycosides, right? Yes, it's a spell. So anthraquinone glycosides, glycosides, if you know the code, that tells you, sugar stuck on there, water soluble. Oh, water soluble compounds, right? So you can start to learn to interpret stuff like that. And here's a model of a core of one of these anthraquinone glycosides, which has a very interesting pattern of energy and relationship. I gotta say, look at that thing, right? And then also, within any group, there are names of individual molecules, right? So we have imodin, chrysophenol, rein, and there's synergists, other anthraquinones that go with them, right? So you start kind of looking in there and seeing how this whole set of molecules is working synergistically together. And then also there's a really important toxicology things about yellow dock that you can explain with constituents, right? Which is number one, oxalates. Oxalates in excess are toxic, right? You can't just like take a little scoop of oxalic acid and eat it. No good. No, don't do that, right? But, is it a significant level of oxalates? Which part of the plant is it in? Which plant part variability? What's the concentration in there? Does it change with the season? How much does it take to be a problem? Oh, well, that depends on the person, blah, 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 right? So oxalate content of yellow dock leaf is rather high. A few young ones as a trail nibble or whatever, they're very tart, but you don't pick a whole mess of greens and cook them up like a batch of kale and eat it. It kind of, the taste sort of tells you not to do that. But there's one case in the toxicology literature of somebody actually fatally, eating a quote bowl of yellow dock leaves. Right. And maybe that, one case is like rare, but still it has the potential. So if you really understand the molecular basis of that potential and stuff like how does the body move it out, Here's another thing about contraindications in yellow dock. In some books, you'll see yellow dock is contraindicated during pregnancy because it contains anthraquinone glycosides. What that is a limited understanding of anthraquinone glycosides during pregnancy. And so then you're like, oh, so what's the mechanism? Oh, it can, they can irritate the bowel and cause a reflex irritation in the uterus, might contribute to having miscarriage, which is really bad. So everybody's like, no yellow dock during pregnancy. The problem with that is it's one of midwives' favorite herbs. So in multiple societies throughout multiple generations, midwives have used yellow dock, right, to help increase the hematocrit, right, the blood carrying capacity, the oxygen carrying capacity of your blood, functionally defined, right, and also to help with constipation, which is common with pregnant mamas, right? So now we get this little bit of knowledge about anthraquinone glycosides, but not having a depth of knowledge, we freak out about it and go, no, pregnant woman, avoid yellow dock, which is actually incomplete, like it's not real, right? Because we have to understand it in the kind of depth to interpret that information, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's another thing constituents can do for you, and in the realm of toxicology, which I think is really, really, really interesting. Like, what time is it?
It is 6:56.
Okay, and the rest we're going to do in 4 minutes. Oh, hey, that wasn't bad. Okay. So bitters, right? Bitters are constituents. There are different kinds of bitter principles. They have actions, We take them to stimulate digestion, bile release, relaxation of the nervous system, et cetera, et cetera. So you can understand, this is an example of terpenes, by the way. You can understand classes of constituents right? And subclasses of constituents and how they're nested hierarchically, right? So you start looking at, oh, now we're going to look at the terpenes, and a famous subtype and a very interesting one for herbalists is the Sesquiterpene lactones, right? Not only because they're bitter, but they also have some anti-cancer properties, at least in, laboratory experiments, and some people are allergic to them. Right. So you got to kind of understand the basis, the underlying thing about that. Like which people, how many, how often, which ones, which plants, where do they occur? Asteraceae, da 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 da, right? So, and then stuff like, the infamous pyrrolizidine alkaloids, right? Or pyrrolizidine, pyrrolizidine, there's different ways to say it. So now even legally, there's like, do not ingest comfrey because it has pyrrolizidine alkaloids. Right. Okay. Step one, always err on the side of caution, right? That way you keep yourself out of trouble. You err on the side of caution, and then you learn more so that you can make more informed judgments about the risk benefit calculation of anything, including medicinal plants. Right. So that, the more you know, the more you understand how to evaluate risk. Right. And toxicology is concerned with risk for sure. Right. So, there are potentially, I always say potentially toxic, because toxicology is a complex realm, right? So potentially toxic alkaloids called pyrrolizidine alkaloids, and too much of certain ones of them can kill you, right? How many different kinds are there? 660-ish? Do they all have the same potential for toxicity? Absolutely not, right? Which ones occur in which plants? And do we change them? And when we extract that plant a certain way, do we get them? And how much of it does it take to be toxic? So there's like, you just keep going with the understanding, by understanding the constituents, right, on a very intimate level, right? So I love to teach about pyrrolizidine alkaloids. I could literally go on until midnight about these because they're so interesting. And like some people are dismissive. Oh, comfrey's fine. I eat it. I drink a quart of it every day. No problem. They're just making that up to scare us because the FDA doesn't want us to take herbs and, and all this stuff. And then there's other people that go, no, don't put that on your skin. It's got pyrrolizidine alkaloids. It's dangerous, right? And then there's the whole spectrum in between of informed understanding of the risk benefit and how it works, right? The mechanisms, the solubility, the occurrence, that means which plants they're in. Yeah, so it's a big story. So when we don't understand the story, we err on the side of caution. But when we do understand the story, then we know how to use the plants appropriately or how not to use them. Yeah. Oh yes, certain molecular features. These have been there's so many papers published on these because they're just super interesting molecules and potentially toxic. Okay, so just wrapping that part up, that was just like a flash tour of the different kinds of things we look at when we learn about constituents, right? And there are so many, it's like, I feel like, dang it, I need to find the elixir of immortality or something so that I can like live another 100 years so I can like feel like I've studied enough about constituents, you know what I mean? Because there's just so much. It just keeps going. It's so fascinating. It keeps like, it gives you this whole like, when you get your basic herbalist skills down, right, and you kind of know actions and energetics of plants and how to make some medicine, different kinds of medicine, it's like, then what? Then you start learning about constituents, and like this detailed knowledge starts welling up, and you develop this closer relationship with the plants and a better understanding of how they're, signaling to the body and how the body is responding to them. It's really cool. Yeah. So we have this course coming up. Here's the course plug section of the webinar real quick. And I'm not going to go all through this, but I wanted to have this up here so you can look at it in the recording. And also it's on a website this way too. But this is like the variety of things we look at when we really do a deep dive with constituents, right? And a lot of this stuff we've already talked about. And then we look at the classes. So like carbohydrates, lipids, amino acid derivatives, cyanogenic glycosides, the infamous, you need to understand those really well. Polyphenols, terpenoids, alkaloids, and then herb-drug interaction side effects, contraindications, and this is where it gets super, super fun, formulation. Right. So principles and practices of formulating based on a knowledge of constituents, in addition to all the other things you understand about the herbs when you formulate with them. Right. So that's pretty cool. The arts of formulation and things about compatibility and incompatibility. Like I put all these tinctures together and then this white stuff fell down on the bottom and I can't like get it to go back. What happened? Right. Constituents will tell you about that. So that's an example of the type of stuff. If you really want to like get into this, there is a 2-semester, it's not exactly semesters, but it's close, course that we're opening, right? And so it's 2 12-week sessions and it starts, when is it? 3/27? 3/27?
Yes. 3/27.
Yeah. Oh, did I write it down? And the cool thing about this, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, is it's different from most courses because you get live class with me with every course. And this is so much fun. We did this back when I was running CSCH down in Boulder, the Colorado School of Clinical Herbalism. And then we ran it through this other school, Herbal Medics Academy. And I would sit down every Thursday night in the back room, at 6 p.m. with my Herbal Constituents folks. And I swear that it was a highlight of my week, because it's really fun to be able to converse about these things. Because like some of it gets complex. You want to ask questions, right? You want to be like, but does that mean this is the same as that or whatever? So having live classes together is, all the people that are like, how to make money with online courses are like, don't do that. Because you just want to turn your course loose, but I'm like, but that's the big fun of it. That's like, I love when people want to talk about constituents. So that's what makes it different. Okay, so registration opens tonight. We have early bird discounts and bonuses. We'll show you where to go find that. One of which is William Cook's fabulous work in a PDF. Love that guy. Okay, and then if you miss early bird, we have one more week that you can do this at regular price, and then we're going to stop registration because it's an actual class. This is like coming to a class with us, So it's, you sign up for it, you start it when it starts, you go through it, maybe you get a little behind, then you catch up or whatever, but there's going to be class every week. So that's why we started on a particular day. We closed the registration, and we're looking to do this probably once a year. It doesn't take a whole year to do it, but it's like 2 semesters. There's some holiday breaks and things like that. And a break for the AHG conference coming up, and a break for Medicines from the Earth conference. So there's a couple of conference breaks. Okay, so you can sign up for one session or both, and where you go is herbalconstituents.com, right? And there you can click on some pictures and links and things, and it will take you over to the information page where it tells you a lot more about the course in detail. If you're interested in that, we finally figured out how to get it set up with payment plans, so it's a lot easier. It's not cheap, but it is super valuable because you get basically 2 semesters of phytochemistry college with us, right? So that's the course plug. That's the book plug. Everybody's seen the book. Good to know. It follows right along with the course. And then we have workshops at Elderberry's Farm, right? So this is, we're doing fewer because we're doing a lot of online stuff with folks now. I love this picture. This is coming 1 more month. The wild cherries are going to bloom. But we're super excited that Sam Kaufman and Suchil are coming to do a wilderness herbal first aid here at last, after like 6 years of me going, please come teach here. And now they live more nearby. So they're coming to do this. Super practical skill set, amazing stuff. It's on our Elderberry's Farm website. There's a link to it, and you can go over to their website. And then we're doing honey pharmacy here in June, which means honey extractions, using honey as a menstruum, making elixirs. Some of you may have taken our elixirs class, how to mix honey and tinctures together and make super powerful, better than syrup, with math and things, it's like really digging into it, right? Make better medicine type stuff. So the honey pharmacy, and we're going to talk about making mead, which is fermenting your infused honey with like champagne yeast. That's what I like to use, and wine type yeast. And how does that change it? And how does that make a medicinal substitute for wine, basically? Yeah. Really cool stuff. So what else do we do? Honey paste, honey pills, a bunch of different honey
Yeah,
pharmacy
X-rays.
techniques. Yeah, because I formulate honey things for companies and stuff now. And I am fascinated with honey as a solvent. So we're going to do that. It's going to be super fun. There's where you can find out about workshops is elderberriesfarm.com. And thank you for showing up. Happy almost spring. Let's talk to people. All right, let's do it. Okay.